the first thing is there's kind of two things, right? Is getting an understanding of your local market. And the way that I would suggest doing that is developing a relationship with a real estate agent, talking to them about what it is that your goals are, if you want single family, multifamily, or if you don't know what your goals are, just having that conversation, get set up with a search. Um, my searches come through every morning. At one point, I had them coming through as things were popping up throughout the day, but I recognized that wasn't necessarily the best approach. But even just seeing how property transactions are going, how long they stay on the market, what the property value is, price per square foot in the areas that you're looking, the difference in property values, whether you're looking at a single family versus a multi, and how they're priced differently, between people that are actually going to live there versus an investment. You start to pick up on those cues pretty naturally as you just happen to see and follow the real estate transactions in your local market. The second piece of that is understanding real estate as a business. So buying books, reading, understanding valuation terminology, and your options for financing when it's a non-owner occupied property. All that stuff is so different. Even if you are familiar with the process of buying a single family owner occupied home, there's so much more that you need to learn, and terminology that you need to understand prior to looking at any sort of investment unit.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty standard when you think about like that traditional American family. It was kind of pretty standard. My mom, I have an older sister, and my mom was took a break in her career until I think we were about 7 or 8 years old, and my dad was third generation in the family business at that point. So we would all kind of gather around the dinner table, and nothing was really a topic that was off the table. My family's a little eccentric from that perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
always had a nice meal, and always had that dinner with the family each night.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, were you the type of person, growing up where you were trying to, you had the entrepreneurial spirit early, or did it not hit you until a little bit later?
No, I was born with it. My family, like I mentioned, had the family business, and they sold it in 1999, and I was 7 years old at the time. And I remember actually explicitly asking my father and my grandfather what I'm supposed to do with myself now. So at that point, it was kind of that constant: what could I do to make a little bit of a living? Um, Middle school, sixth grade, I recognized what sticks of gum, little packs of juicy fruit cost at the store. Bought a bunch of them, kept them in my locker, and sold it for like $1, and each one was like 10 cents. So I was always coming up with stuff like that. That you just you knew that you wanted to end up working for yourself and finding a way to make a living.
Yeah, yeah. What types of business were your parents in? Or what was the business
So
that they
yeah,
did?
my it was scrap metal. So my great grandfather started the business as a cooperage and auto parts, and it transitioned to scrap metal from about the 40s through when they sold it in '99.
Wow, wow. So that was a generational uh, business that you guys had there, huh? That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still upset with them for selling it.
Yeah,
I wanted that guarantee of going to college and having a job, but
yeah.
hey, it builds character.
No, that's great. That's great. So where'd you go to college at?
Ohio State.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So talk a little bit about so you went to school.
Yeah.
What happened next? Where did you jump out into um, into the job market and have a traditional job? And, at what point did you start investing in real estate?
Yeah. So, like you said, I went to college, got a job, um, moved around. So I went to Ohio State, briefly lived in Seattle for a little bit with Boeing. Then I moved to Connecticut doing financial data and analytics. Um, then moving into more of a shopper and retailer data and analytics role in Connecticut. And then about 3.5 years ago, my wife and I, well, she was my girlfriend at the time, decided to move back to Columbus. We loved it here. Um, and one of the biggest factors there was simply the cost of living. We knew that we wanted to buy a house. We knew that we wanted to have kids. We had dogs at the time, so we wanted that backyard. And it was just so prohibitive in Connecticut. So you start looking at real estate markets, and obviously in a city that we wanted to go to, like Columbus. So we moved back here, and about 9 months after we moved back to Columbus, we ended up buying our home. But in that process of finding our home, which was incredibly difficult, being in the market the way it is here in Columbus, um, our realtor became a close friend of mine. And one of the things he suggested was, like outside of the traditional single family home that you might be looking at, have you thought about multifamily units where, realistically your mortgage could be paid by whoever your tenant is?
Mhm.
And I hadn't really given it that much thought before then. And though for the purchase of our house, we didn't want to take that route, being that this was a home that we could see ourselves living in for 10 to 15 years with our family or starting our family. But it got me interested in the market and following the market on a pretty much daily basis as I would receive the MLS updates. So after we bought our home, I loved the process, just fell in love with the process, recognized that there was an opportunity um, to really start making some money and building some wealth. So read a lot of books. The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, that was one of my favorites. Really inspiring stuff, to the point where I felt that I'm looking at the markets every day. I'm studying the markets. I'm educating myself. This is something that I could really see doing. I'm also a very handy guy, probably too handy for my wife's liking, breaking plumbing and electrical and stuff. But I could fix the things that I found, or if there were some apparent defects, I could take care of that, wouldn't have to pay for it. So at that point, I decided this is the thing that I want to do. I want to get into the market. I want to build that wealth over time. Um, but it was really challenging. These
Mhm.
things would come on the market, and an hour later, I had 15 offers, and at that point, even cash wasn't doing it. It was just the highest and best. And
Mhm.
so, how do you break in? And then finally, in February, this past February, about a little over 2 years, maybe actually 2.25 years after I first started thinking about investing in real estate, I finally got my first property. It was a bit of a fun adventure, but we got it, and it's actually going really well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So what type of property was the first one that you picked up?
It's a duplex in an area of town um, just north of what would be considered kind of campus or student housing, a
Hmm.
very young professional area. It's right on the border of a town called Clintonville that's very desirable for a lot of young professionals or young
Hmm.
families. Just a standard duplex, and have great tenants. Everything's going well with it.
No, that's great. So talk a little bit about the things that when you first started looking at properties, you mentioned that you started following the market. What were you doing? How were you following the market? What types of tips would you give someone who's interested in starting in real estate? What type of tips would you give them to get started?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that the first thing is there's kind of two things, right? Is getting an understanding of your local market, and the way that I would suggest doing that is developing a relationship with a real estate agent, talking to them about what it is that your goals are, if you want single family, multifamily, or if you don't know what your goals are, just having that conversation, get set up with a search. Um, my searches come through every morning. At one point, I had them coming through as things were popping up throughout the day, but I recognized that wasn't necessarily the best approach. But even just seeing how property transactions are going, how long they stay on the market, what the property value is, price per square foot in the areas that you're looking, the difference in property values, whether you're looking at a single family versus a multi, and how they're priced differently, between people that are actually going to live there versus an investment. You start to pick up on those cues pretty naturally as you just happen to see and follow the real estate transactions in your local market. The second, so that's kind of the first piece is set yourself, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with a realtor. You can do that on realtor.com or Zillow or something. Set yourself up on a search. Um, I just happened to become very friendly and close with my realtor, and it just kind of made sense to bounce some ideas off of him at the time. But the second piece of that is um, understanding real estate as a business. So buying books, reading, understanding valuation terminology, and um, your options for financing when it's a non-owner occupied property. All that stuff is so different. Even if you are familiar with the process of buying a single family owner occupied home, there's so much more that you need to learn, and terminology that you need to understand prior to looking at any sort of investment unit.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. What are some of the big learnings that you took away in the beginning? Some things that you were sort of struggling with, how to evaluate things or terms or anything like that. What were some of your early struggles?
I think the biggest struggle that I came across was understanding, and maybe that isn't the same in every market, but that cash is not always king for these properties. People are looking for the highest dollar value. Deals don't come around too often, even if you do have a cash quick close relative to other financing, especially in this massive seller's market that we're in. The other thing is what you learn quickly, especially if you're looking for multifamily units in desirable areas. People will strongly overpay if they're going to be living in one side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So fighting against the person that's going to use it as their own home, and maybe I shouldn't have said fighting, competing against
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's going to use it as their own home is oftentimes they're going to be willing to pay quite a bit more than you as an investor. Well, how do you know what you're going to pay as an investor? So you got to familiarize yourself with valuations, right? Cap rates, gross rent multipliers, and put together a list for yourself of uh, what your criteria really is. So one of the things that I really struggled with is determining what my criteria is. What is the cap rate that I want to demand? What is the GRM that it's going to be my minimum? And you learn that through kind of studying the comparables in the market, talking to other people that are interested. The other piece that I thought was incredibly challenging to learn was simply the finance of non-owner occupied real estate. You have to pay to play.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with traditional mortgage financing. So understanding what your options are outside of the traditional mortgages, the traditional 15 or 30-year mortgages that you might be familiar with for your own properties.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So what were some of those learnings that you learned about the alternative financing methods?
Yeah, a lot of the opportunities are not fixed rate.
Mm-hmm.
So non-owner occupied properties, in order to get a fixed rate, you typically have to pay pretty heavy upfront in order to get that fixed rate over time. So understanding what the options are at an adjustable rate over a particular period of time and being comfortable with kind of taking that interest rate risk over the life of the loan, however long you want to amortize that initial fixed piece. And that a traditional mortgage through any sort of credit union or any lender who issues mortgages are not necessarily the only options available. We actually ended up, I'm in a partnership with my father for this, financing through Morgan Stanley
Mm-hmm.
on kind of a traditional just loan, a 7-year adjustable rate loan that has really is not nearly close to a traditional mortgage, just kind of more backed by personal assets than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So making those phone calls, understanding that you're probably not going to get that traditional 30-year easy mortgage fixed rate that you'd want prior to, or unless you're actually going to be living in it yourself.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. No, it is interesting when you start opening up your mind to the other methods out there.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about you mentioned that obviously the market's very, very hot right now
Yep.
from a seller's perspective, which makes it difficult to be able to buy. Uh, do you have any tips or anything that you feel that you did to sort of to stand out with your offer and how you actually won that project, that duplex that you have now?
Yeah. I mean, over the course of the 2 years, I probably put in something like 2 dozen offers. Um, some cash quick close, some traditional financing, and just nothing seemed to work. Um, I think, to be quite honest, what happened with our situation was a bit lucky in that we were actually not chosen as the first offer, but the first offer was extremely aggressive in their closing time. They wanted a 5-day close, and our seller wanted to get out of it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Their first offer fell through on the day of closing. We were the next highest. They called us and said, "Are you still interested?"
Wow.
Um, so we learned at the time, again, very motivated seller. At that point, the pendulum sort of swung towards us a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, in a sense where we knew that they were motivated at this point. They wanted to get a deal done, and we actually revised our offer significantly lower. So, uh, to be honest, I don't even know what advice I can share, except for the fact of don't give up. Don't let the failure bother you,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to happen. It's going to happen frequently, but at some point, just let the world do its thing, and the right situation that might have been challenging for somebody is gonna end up rewarding you.
Yeah, absolutely. how have your tenants been with the COVID um, event, we'll call it?
Yeah.
Have you been lucky enough to have tenants that weren't really that terribly affected, or has it impacted you?
Yeah, we've actually been extremely lucky, and our tenants have been lucky as well. They have careers that haven't quite been affected. On the one side of the duplex, um, one of our tenants did end up losing their job, but it was kind of a part-time gig until she could find the right opportunity that fit her career path. She had recently graduated with a master's degree, so it wasn't the biggest issue, but yeah, all of them are pretty lucky, and we're pretty lucky in that aspect as well, that it hasn't impacted us much. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that during the times that you do have to go down there and help them out, that you're being respectful of their space and wearing a mask and gloves and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. No, makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about how other say there's another younger person who's looking to get involved in real estate? I know that you mentioned a little bit about obviously how to do some research about the area, but what
Yeah.
other types of things can they start to look into to just start educating themselves, or getting that process started so that they can have a successful first go at this when they do actually make that leap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it just comes down to your internal motivation. We have so many resources available to us, so many websites where you can set up searches, or just look at follow some podcasts, um, look at recent real estate transactions. You don't have to have fancy technology. Um, Anybody on their phone can download an app that looks at real estate in their area, and start just to get an understanding of how things are selling, how quickly they're selling, pricing. It really doesn't take much. One of the biggest thing that I would advise people to do is put yourself out there. Start looking on LinkedIn to see who is a real estate investor around you, or if you have friends of friends or colleagues that do it. Reach out and start having conversations about their experiences, um, and really just learning from everybody else. I think is that huge piece that you really have to put yourself out there for. Anybody can download an app, anybody can study real estate transactions, but I think hearing directly from people that have done it before and will help you to shape what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can set your own criteria up and know when there's an opportunity to jump on a deal that might be attractive to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen people make mistakes, and it's very obvious that they didn't do research and they just jumped at the first opportunity they saw. Um, my a my sister's boyfriend, I'll say, is a great guy. Love him to death. But he was one of those that saw the first opportunity and jumped at it without doing his research. Didn't really understand that in that particular area there were significant foundational issues. Isn't really handy, so doesn't really look at things like plumbing and electrical. And lo and behold, has ended up spending a really strong amount of money over the course of the year and a half that he's owned his property. So it's a pretty interesting stark contrast to compare um, him to other people I know who have done this as well. So
Yeah.
you can definitely get yourself into trouble if you don't do your research.
That brings up the next question too. You mentioned, when you look at things that are attractive to you, what are some of the qualifications or the check boxes that need to be checked off that you say, yeah, this is a legitimate opportunity. We're going to go ahead and put an offer in on this one. What are some of those steps that you walk through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first piece, and I know like everybody says this about real estate, is location, right? Is it in the location that I feel comfortable with, that I would feel comfortable managing, that's within a reasonable distance to my house? So if I have to go there at 3 a.m. for some sort of emergency, it's not going to take me an hour to do so. So kind of getting the scope of your location. And then I think the piece of, are you looking at single, multi-family properties? What are you most comfortable with? Um, After you kind of set that aside, I think then for me, it's mostly financial. Um, is before I see the property. So in order to actually go see the property, I have to make sure it's in the location I want, that it fits what I want, being a duplex or a triplex or four or more. And then it has to fit the financial model that I put together. So I built myself an amortization spreadsheet and model every property the same way. I always assume a higher interest rate than I think I'm going to get, because I err on the side of caution. and model, what your PITI would be after, um, with the assumptions that you're making. I take that and then I apply it to, what would a reasonable rent be for this area, do a little research on what similar properties are renting for or have rented for, to make sure that that my return, however you want to calculate return, some people like GRM, some people are at cap rate, fits my minimum, while also budgeting for things like monthly expenses and that type of thing. So once you have that criteria built, and that took a while to build, to be honest, to get that model in a place that I felt comfortable with it. And that's where you really kind of have to start understanding transactions and finance and rental rates in the areas and really put it all together.
Mm-hmm.
That's that final piece. And if we check all those three boxes, the location, the actual layout of the property, and meets my financial models, then I'll go see it, or then I'll try to go see it if I can. Obviously, not always going to be the case um, with investment properties and tenants and everything. But at that point, I would be comfortable moving forward, whether it be viewing the property or putting in a curb offer on it.
Mm-hmm. No, love it, love it. So, what would you say is next for you? What's the next goal that you have?
It's twofold. So I'm actually looking to grow my properties. Obviously, I know that could take a little bit more time. I'm actually seeing one tomorrow. It just popped up on the market today. I'm very excited about it. And then the second piece is I'm actually currently working towards the pre-licensure to get my real estate license, so that
Very cool.
eventually I can do something in real estate, or have real estate be, my full-time gig, whether it be, doing a little investment stuff, doing a little real estate sales, maybe dabbling in some handyman or contract work, but making, real estate a big portion of my life.
That's great. That's great. Daniel, if people want to reach out to you, what would you say is the best way to be able to get in touch?
I love having conversations like this. I really do. Email me, call me, text me, whatever. I would absolutely love and welcome having those types of conversations.
Excellent. Do you have any contacts that you want to throw out to the world here? Any?
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. Just say I'm out there, email and,
yeah,
and phone.
yeah.
Awesome. So my email is bobry.18@gmail.com, and Bobry is spelled with B as in Bravo, O as in Oscar, B as in Bravo, R as in Romeo, Y as in Yankee. I always have to spell that out because B's and D's often get
Mm-hmm.
confused over the phone, but both are B's. And then my phone number is 585-703-8429. People get confused. I do live in Columbus, Ohio, but I do have a Rochester, New York phone number still. But yeah, I'd absolutely welcome that.
Love it. Love it. No, this is fantastic, Daniel. Hopefully you've helped inspire some other people that have been looking at getting involved in real estate. I personally love it, obviously. So, can't say enough about it. So, but again,
Absolutely.
thank you for spending the time here on the show, and we look forward to hearing what you do next.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. I really, I love talking about this. So it was a great opportunity for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.